We are here to talk about circular economy and resource management. We're joined today by Lucy Picken from our UK school team. Thrilled to have Lucy back for another chat about this. We are very keen to get your feedback at the end of the session as well. So you will receive a link at the sort of on the exit screen and in the email as well. If you just take 30 seconds to answer a couple of questions, it really does help us out. It helps us form our future sessions. So if you would take a moment, we would greatly appreciate it. I don't think there's anything else I need to say. I think that's my checklist. So I'm going to hand it over to Lucy, and we'll get started.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Wendy. And thank you everyone for being so prompt this morning, this evening, wherever you are. And welcome to this session on Introduction to the Circular Economy and a little bit on resource management in there as well. We have an hour together today, again this morning or this evening, no matter where you are. And so we've got quite a bit of content to get through. So we are going to get cracking and get flying through that. Just to introduce myself, Wendy's already kind of alluded to who I am, but my name's Lucy Picken. I am a sustainability consultant at Action Sustainability and the Supply Chain Sustainability School. I specialize in both carbon and waste, but look at you guys, I'm going to be speaking about waste today. And as Wendy's already said, and as the accent gives away, I am over the other side of the pond in the UK side of things. But as the supply chain school now operates across the UK, Ireland, the US, and Australia, it's quite nice to be able to do a different session today and speak about the US side of things. So do hang on with me and bear with me if any of my terminology is a little bit British today, but hopefully the concepts still travel well. What we're going to try and do today, so this is our outcomes for the 1 hour we have together. Hopefully, we'll have an improved understanding of what the circular economy is and the drivers that may influence it. We're going to look at this in terms of considering it in terms of your own context, your own standards, and your requirements. And this is something that I encourage you to drop in the chat if you have any thoughts as we go along. Just echoing what Wendy just said, if there's anything, that you've got written into your own standards or policies, do let us know. It's good for us to hear what you're doing as well. We're also going to consider opportunities to introduce circular ways of working within your own organisation and also on behalf of your clients. We've got a few case studies as we go along today, both, ordinary day-to-day case studies as well as built environment-based case studies as well. We'll present them as we go along. And then at the bottom there, be able to better explain the challenges and opportunities to your colleagues, customers, and supply chain. Or if you go home this evening and tell someone what the circular economy is, that's a win for me and you've taken something away from the session. Just to echo again what Wendy said about participation and a few house rules, microphones and cameras are off for this webinar session as we are on Zoom. But as Wendy said, if you have any questions or comments, please do either use the Q&A or the chat. I do encourage you to put whatever you're thinking in there. We are a small group, so no question is a silly question for today. So yeah, please do drop them in there. Or if you want to introduce yourself and say hello, please do that as well. We'll have a look as we go along. We have a few poll questions we're going to ask today. Please do get involved. We want you to get as involved as possible. And it means you don't just have to listen to me speak for an hour, but you can get involved with the session for today. And finally, we will distribute the slides after the session, so no need to take any in-depth notes if you just want to listen and get involved with the questions as we go along. And another one, just to echo what Wendy said, we do appreciate any feedback that you're able to give us. If there's something you hear us touch on today that you think, I'd really like to hear about that in the future, we can definitely put a session on that, but we don't know if we don't know, to be honest. So if you let us know, then we'll be able to put a session on that in the future, and me and Wendy can put our heads together and put that one on for you. And this is something I like to bring in just before we get going when we're talking about the circular economy. It's something we developed on the UK side of things with one of our leadership groups that we run. However, it's just thinking about no matter where you sit in the process, you have that link to the circular economy. A lot of what we talk about when we talk about waste, the circular economy, different industries, sometimes you think, I'm not the client, I can't make an impact. But this graph here or this image here shows that no matter what, you can get involved with the circular economy, whether you're the client and the designer who can design out waste from the start, or whether you're the supplier or contractor who's on site, you can help influence the procurement of materials, for example, or improve behaviours on site. All different things that you can help support the circular economy and improve in the way we work as well. So just bear this one in mind as we go throughout the session. And before we do get going with the content, if you've ever joined one of our sessions before, we do love a Menti. You'll know the school loves using this. So we're going to ask a question over on menti.com. So if you head over to menti.com and enter the code that you can see on screen, which is 76711601, and we'll drop that in the chat. Or just scan the QR code on your phone and you'll be able to get in there as well. I can see we've got I can see the number of us we've got, so most of us are there. I'll give you a couple seconds to get in, and then I will go to our first question. I can see some people joining us and introducing themselves in the chat as well. Nice to see you today. Okay, I'll ask you our first question. What comes to mind when you hear the words circular economy? Quite a simple question, maybe a simple question, but it's all anonymous. But just what comes to mind first when you think of the words circular economy? You should be able to put multiple answers in here. I have set it to unlimited. But thinking about what does this mean to you? As you can see, when a word gets entered more than once, it gets bigger. So recycling's that big one in there. We've got no waste, repair, supply chain, that's a good one. We'll touch on that as we go through today. Innovation, yeah, we might have to innovate to be able to be more circular. Closing the loop, I like that one. Better steward resources. I've not had that one before, that's a good one. One's come off the screen, I can't quite see. There we go. Theory, not always practical. Cradle to cradle, that's another good one. Giving back, self-sustaining. I've never heard of this word before. Biomimic, mimicry?
Oh, biophilic design, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Sustainable solutions, often prioritizes plastics. That's a really good point. We're going to talk about plastics today. Sustainability. Have I missed any? Innovative materials. Yeah, some really good words in here. Good to see what our heads are thinking of when we think of the circular economy. Let's go back to the session with the time that we do have together today. I'm going to start at the very beginning. I'm going to bring us all to the same wavelength because we all think about different things when it comes to waste. But what is waste and who might be interested? So, the legal definition of solid waste offered by the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act is any garbage or refuse, sludge from a wastewater treatment plant, water supply treatment plant, or air pollution control facility, and other discarded material resulting from industrial, commercial, mining, and agricultural operations and from community activities. So the Environmental Protection Agency also notes that this definition of solid waste is not limited to wastes that are physically solid, as wastes are also liquid, semi-solid, or contained gaseous materials, which I find very interesting to see as a definition. And what I did think to do is bring you the UK definition as well, or the EU definition. And it just shows how waste is considered a different thing on a global scale at the same time. So the EU Waste Framework Directive also has this definition, and it summarizes it also quite nicely. So the EU Waste Framework Directive describes waste as any substance or object that the holder discards or intends to or is required to discard. So straight away we can see that difference between the length of the definitions as well. But this description implies that a substance or an object is considered to be a waste once it's been decided that there's no further practical use for it. The word discard in particular also implies that an object has no value, something that's not needed, something that might be unwelcome, and at all of the times that substance or object should be considered as an item with the potential for continued use. So if we start considering a different mindset when we talk about definitions like this, we can think about renaming these substances or objects as resources, maybe arising, spares, surplus, and this can help to identify this difference and shift our mindset a little bit. Something to think about is that something useful or valuable might be in the right place at the wrong time. So we might have skips or bins or garbage cans that are full of things that might be useful elsewhere. We might be able to use them on another project that we're working on, but the way we've traditionally thought about things is just to throw things away because we don't need it anymore. And this brings me really nicely to the circular economy, what we're all here to talk about today. But the definition of a circular economy is an alternative to a traditional linear economy, where we make, use, and dispose of our items, in which we keep resources in use for as long as possible, extract the maximum value from them whilst in use, then recover and regenerate products and materials at the end of each service life. So, to summarize this nicely, it's just about making our items last longer, keeping them in use for as long as possible. And this graphic, I think, shows it a little bit better. At the top here, we have that linear economy, which I just mentioned, where we grow, mine, or quarry our items, for example, so that we have that raw material. These raw materials then go through a process of design, they're then manufactured to come together, and then sadly but typically it's become the norm to just dispose of them once we're finished with them. Maybe it's broken and we can't do anything with it anymore. And this is due to our lack of attention to the likes of resource use and waste management, that this hasn't been an issue, but now we are becoming a little bit more mindful. We're in this session today, we're talking about the circular economy. So we are looking more at this circular economy, this circular mindset that we can start to implement. So in a circular economy, we take these raw materials and we go into the design process thinking about the end of life, such as how might we repair the item at the end of its life? How might we maintain it? How might we reuse it? And how can we recycle it? Or when it gets to that end of life stage. This feeds into that manufacture phase. So depending on what industry you are, you might start putting innovations in place, such as off-site manufacturing, for example. Then we get into the consumption phases where we think a little bit more consciously about what we're doing with our items. And then we reach the maintenance and reuse stage. So you can see this connection with the dark blues on screen here. Instead of disposing, we think about maintaining and reusing and refurbishing our items. So we think about how we might fix it back up so that it can be, so that we can maintain that life and extend that life cycle. And then at the end, we are able to recycle the components back into the life cycle and into the phases so that we can reuse them again. And this is all because we think with a circular mindset right from the design stage, right from the outset. We think about what might happen at the end of the life. And this just continually happens, and we keep them products, them materials all in cycle as long as possible. And this is a quote from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. If you've not heard of them before, they are an organization that does a lot in the circular economy. It's their main focus. And they say that the circular economy is based on three principles driven by design. The first being eliminating waste and pollution. Hopefully, that one is quite self explanatory there. Then we have circulate products and materials at the highest value, something that I've just touched on. And then regenerating nature there. This one's a really interesting point to look at because we as humans on a global basis have learned the hard way that our natural systems are our most effective barrier to climate change. We must protect nature and also push for nature positive. Why would we continue to break systems and destroy them when it'll take us a long time to design something that works half as well as what we have already? And at the bottom there, we can see it is underpinned by a transition to renewable energy and materials. A circular economy decouples economic activity from the consumption of finite resources. It is a resilient system that is good for business, people, and the environment as well. So these are some big words that can make us think about our processes a little bit differently. Can we do stuff differently? Can we bring materials to sites differently? Can we procure a little bit better? And what this tells us is this is as much as the way we do business and bring products to the market as the actual products themselves. So it's the way we operate as well. A circular economy is all about the products and also about how we do business. And this is quite a crazy image to put on screen, but another one from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is quite a good resource. And if we look at over on the right-hand side in particular, the blue side, the technical nutrients, you can see this flow from the mining at the top there to the parts manufacturer. Put my mouse on screen so you can see it. To the parts manufacturer, to the products manufacturer, through to service provider, and then the user here, this big blue blob. And then at the bottom, it falls down into energy recovery and landfill. This would be our linear economy. But in a circular economy, we think, how might I maintain it myself? How can I keep this item in use for as long as possible? Then if I want to reuse it, I think about talking back to the service provider. How can we think about reusing our products a bit better? Then refurbishing back to the product manufacturer, and then recycling back to that parts manufacturer. So it's how we think about how we do things a little bit differently and thinking about all them components and how we can keep these products and materials in use as long as possible. This is just to echo what I've already been talking about. And it's important that when we talk about circularity, it isn't just about recycling. I know it was one of them big words on our word cloud earlier, but sometimes when I think we start talking about sustainability, we go into a carbon tunnel vision. And sometimes when we come into the world of talking about waste and circularity, we go into a recycling tunnel vision in a way. But it's not the best and only approach. Thinking about different things, as you can see on screen, as do you need the product in the first place? Can you fix it instead? Could you design it better from the outset? Maybe you're designing a new product and you can make some lessons learned from something you've done in the past. Can you retain more value? Could somebody else use it? Or also, could you save time and money as well? These are all good things that interlink with each other. And it means we can step away from just thinking about recycling and think about all these different other aspects that can bring us into a more circular mindset. Quite another quite crazy graph or image to put on screen for you now. And it might be a little bit small on your screen, but you'll get the slide deck after the session so that you can look through this. And we've also added some links to the slide deck for you to have a look at this. But I'll talk about this in a bit more detail when you do want to look back on this. But it's going back into that technical sphere that I just mentioned. And it's another resource from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And this showcases circular models in the built environment. This graphic shows how three business models can work together to form a circular economy. So these models are circular design, circular use, and also circular recovery. And we've touched on all these as we've gone through the session so far. So this starts with designing to improve service life and improve how a product is maintained, how it's repaired, how it's refurbished, or maybe how it's remanufactured at the end of its life. It then may be selling a product so that it can be purchased back over a period of time, or maybe providing spare parts and add-ons which support the repairing of products. So it's moving away from a transactional process with products, but instead selling a service where the products are part of that service. And this is all part of the circular economy. The organization that provides that service delivery is taking responsibility for that product. So they might be buying it back, providing a repair service, or providing spare parts, for example, so that we can have this circular economy embedded into the way we do business, for example, and the way we operate as a company. But that's a really good resource to have a look at in your spare time if you're wanting to read into this further. But I thought it wouldn't be right for me to talk about circular business models and not bring in some examples on, as I said at the beginning, some day-to-day examples, not just built environment ones. So I've got two examples, one clothing business and one furniture homeware business that are embedding circular economy principles into how they operate. So this first one is Patagonia. So you may or may not have heard of this as an organization, and they are a clothing organization. Again, it might be a little bit blurry on screen, but again, you'll get the slide deck after the session. But as you can see from this image, they carry the circular economy and a lot of sustainability in general, to be honest, in the principles of what they do. So at the top there, they say that we reduce. So they make products that last a long time, so you don't need to buy more than what you need. So you shouldn't have to throw it away. You should be able to use it for a long time. But when you have to, they've got that repair there. So they say they help you repair it when it's broken, and you actually can send it back and they help you fix it up so you can maintain the life of your product. Reuse, so it says there that we help find a home for your gear when you no longer need it. So if you do want to sell it or pass it on, they can support you with that process as well. And recycling is in there as well. So taking back the product that you have so that they can use the parts in a new item, for example, when it's really, really worn down. So that's carrying in the circular economy principles throughout the whole life cycle of their products. And this is part of their business that I've just touched on. So they have that part, I don't think it says it on screen, but it's called warmware. And it's part of the business where the consumer can sell back all pieces that they don't want anymore, and they will refurbish it and sell it back on at a lower price. And as I touched on, the fix it bit is here as well. So if you rip your jacket, for example, you can send it back and they'll fix it up for you. It may come back a little bit different, but it'll be a one of a kind piece of clothing that you're then allowed to that you can then use over and over again. So it's a good example of the circular economy. Okay, my second and final example in this section, and I'm switching up the industry one more time, is I said furniture and homeware, but this is IKEA. So you may or may not have heard them. They are a global organization. But IKEA say on their website that they design products from the very beginning to be reused, refurbished, remanufactured, and as a last resort, recycled. So thinking back to that circular diagram I showed you, that's all about the circular economy. So they say that this means they design to be able to use renewable or recycled materials. They standardize their products, they care about them, they repair them, they have disassemble and reassemble techniques, they remanufacture, and they also recycle their products as well. Some examples they have, because you might be thinking, what's this image on the right-hand side, is a technique of assembly where they use a click technique, which makes it easy to both assemble and disassemble the furniture, so that if you do need to move it, it won't break in the moving process. And if you've ever been to an IKEA store, they have areas where you can buy second-hand parts, where the consumer has sold back the product for a little bit of money back, and then you can then buy it again as a different consumer. Or sometimes they have walls full of spare screws and bolts, for example, where you can go and get them if you've broken something or one's fallen out, for example. And then finally, they also sell all their furniture in different little pieces. If you've ever shopped at IKEA before, and that means that if one bit breaks, you don't have to replace the whole piece of furniture. You can just replace that one small little part. So hopefully that's two good examples of circular economy in an organization. Okay, I'm going to head back to the Menti for another question to you all. And I'm going to ask you a question on stakeholders. Who is interested in the circular economy? Who might be interested and who might influence you as a person or you as an organization to be more circular or manage your waste a little bit better? There's been a shout out to the as is section of IKEA in the chat as well. Looking through some of the comments. I'll read all your comments at the end of the session because there's some really good ones in there. Okay, some comments coming in. Got everyone. I like this answer when it comes in. Yep, everyone should be. We should all be. Hopefully, we should all be interested, but not everyone is. But we can all influence it for sure. Your clients might be pushing for this. You might have some client requirements. Remember that one for the next slide I'll pull up. Consumers, people who want to live, owners, designers, operators, anyone who cares. That's a good one. Links in with that everyone I just mentioned. The community. What have I missed as it's moving around my screen? Manufacturers, remote communities. That's a really interesting one as well. I've not had that one before. And frontline communities as well. Governments have that opportunity to influence absolutely with regulations and legislation and policies, for example. The customer, designers, I might repeat myself, but we're moving around. Future generations, that's building into the definition of sustainability as a whole. Absolutely. Some really good answers there. Have I missed any? Oh, it's just moved again. No, I think I've covered them all, so we'll carry on with the session. There were really good answers, and it is just to get your thinking on why you're being driven to be in the likes of this session and understand why circularity means things to you. If there's anything else you want to drop in the chat in terms of why you're driven to talk about the circular economy, what change you want to be making with the circular economy, myself and Wendy would really welcome them comments as well. And my final slide on this before I go into policy and drivers as well is talking about something called the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So you may or may not have heard of these, but this is a set of 17 interconnected goals that you can see here on screen. So these were brought together by the United Nations member states in 2015 as part of the 2030 agenda to drive sustainable development. They have the goal to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity, peace, and justice for all on a global basis. So when we're talking about the circular economy and resource efficiency, you can see that most direct link with goal number 12, responsible consumption and production. But one thing I really like to hammer home with these sessions is that when we talk about resource efficiency, it's not just about that one goal. It's interlinks with all the different things. I talked earlier that I specialize in both carbon and waste. They both go hand in hand together. But when we look at these goals, you can see sustainable goal number 11, for example, sustainable cities and communities. We can't be more sustainable within our cities and our communities without driving waste reduction. And then, climate action, I've just touched on that one. If you're looking to reduce your carbon emissions, waste might be a big one for you, so you need to reduce that. And then finally, one last example from me, number 14, life below water. Something I like to mention in my sessions. You may or may not have heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, a bit closer to home than a lot of you, where it's floating between Hawaii and California. A massive patch of rubbish, garbage floating around the Pacific Ocean, estimated to be about 3 times the size of France. And I did a bit of research on this recently, and I know there's an organization trying to clean this up, but there's also the likes of biodiversity that's learnt to live on the plastics that are in in the ocean because it is mainly made of plastics and microplastics as well. So quite a sad thing to see that our biodiversity is learning to live on plastics within a massive piece of garbage. But it just shows the scale of the waste problem on a global basis. Okay, policy and drivers for change. This can be a little bit bland sometimes when we start talking about legislation, but we'll fire through it and we'll give you some examples of what we've got in here. So US legislation is a bit different to how it operates this side of the pond on the UK because we're a lot smaller over here. And you're doing a lot of different things depending on the state that you're in. So Wendy kindly pulled this slide together for me and it just shows the different legislations and programs in just a few of your states. So seeing there that California's got the integrated waste management and the short-lived climate pollutants in there as well. So mandatory diversion and organics reduction is in there. And you can see that there's no single state landfill tax, and that's in California. Then going down to Florida at the bottom there, you've got no statewide landfill tax either, but there's $30 to $80 plus per ton, depending on the county and facility. So it's so different over in the US and all the different things you've got going on and the different fees, depending on the county and the states and all the different legislations that are in place. But it's worth checking on the state that you're operating in the county that you're operating in when it comes to this kind of thing, because you may be having to comply with different taxes on what's going on over there. And we wanted to go into EPR a little bit. I will go into too in depth into this because Wendy's got some good slides she's going to talk you through. But what does Google say this is? And why is this theme important? So as you can see on screen, extended producer responsibility is a policy approach that makes producers responsible for their products along the entire life cycle, including at the post-consumer stage. By doing so, it helps achieve environmental goals such as recycling targets. And I'm just going to pass over to Wendy, who's going to talk you through the next couple of slides.
Great, thanks, Lucy. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about extended PCR rules. Now, I won't go into a lot of detail because there's a lot of detail to go through, and we only have a set amount of time. But basically, what is happening at the moment in real time is the rollout of PCR rules for several states. I've got seven highlighted on the screen right now, as well as nine Canadian provinces. These apply to uh, states in different ways. So again, going back to Lucy's point of you really do have to pay attention to where you are and where you're operating and where you're doing business. But the overall idea of these regulations are to not only create more of a cohesive recycling program plan for each state and eventually, building out to a more of a nationwide consistency. It's encouraging recycling targets as well as shifting the responsibility to the producer. So, Lucy, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So I'm going to talk really briefly about how they work. This is a very, very rudimentary explanation of the regulation in practice. But basically, if you are a manufacturer or a distributor or you're selling any kind of item that comes in packaging. Now, packaging is there's broad definitions, and again, it varies state by state. But we could be talking about cardboard, paper, glass, metal, plastic. So it is important for you to do a little research and figure out how, you are impacted if you are exempt, because there is a chance that you might be exempt. But if you operate in any of those seven states, or you sell to any of those seven states, you want to do business in those seven states, the best thing you can do from the jump is register with a producer responsibility organization, PRO. The most prevalent of those, I think I'm going to talk about on the next slide, but you can register. It's free to register. From there, they can help you figure out what data you need to collect on the products that you sell, the packaging that you send your products out in. And then what you're going to do is pay a fee to the PRO, which not only keeps the program going, but supports recycling initiatives. So you pay into this program to help not only maintain your avoiding fees and avoiding penalties, but you're helping to grow these programs, increase the recyclability of some of your products, encourage recycling in your communities. It really is a good program. So, it obviously goes one of two ways. Either you're helping to establish a robust recycling program, and you're going to then achieve your targets for recycling content. And if you fall short of that, there is a chance that you could face penalties, which are not only financial, but it could also result in sales restrictions in those areas. So definitely want to avoid that. The benefits are there. At the end of the day, we have happy consumers, happy clients, happy manufacturers. So, just on the next slide, I really wanted to quickly talk about a couple, just to wrap it all up. I mentioned signing up with the PRO being the first step. The Circular Action Alliance is, I believe, the only approved PRO that covers the majority of those seven states where they have the regulations live. If you click on that link, it will take you to that website. Again, that information is going to be sent out in this email after this webinar. We're not just talking about these seven states. There are many other states that have packaging regulations in the pipeline. I've listed them here. This is really gaining traction. It's becoming, in lieu of a federal sort of standard regulation. A lot of the states are they're taking up the mantle, and they're just doing this work on their own. And what the great thing about this is yes, there's a lot of inconsistencies across the states, but the principles sort of remain intact. The one thing that I will highlight is that the timelines are all different. There's a really great white paper that I've linked on the slide here, which explains where the different states are if you wanted to make sure that you are in line with your local legislation or your local regulations. what's coming in certain areas if you're operating in Massachusetts or Hawaii or North Carolina, for example. Do give this a read. I think it's a really useful resource. Um, if you do have any questions about this in particular, I would encourage you to ask them in the chat. But with all of that said, I'm going to pass it back to Lucy, and we're going to talk about landfill, not landfill taxes. Sorry.
The waste management
Wait,
hierarchy.
yes. All right.
Back to the waste management hierarchy, but thanks for that one, Wendy. And again, something that we're encouraging throughout this session, please do keep talking to us in the chat. Like I say, small group of us, and I've just been reading through your comments. Thanks to those who introduced yourselves, and also all the nice comments that are educating us today as well. So please do keep dropping your thoughts in there. It's really nice to see, and we can answer your questions or you can answer ours as we go along. And as I mentioned, I'm going to go into the waste management hierarchy. This is, I don't believe it's a legal obligation in the US. I could be corrected, but it is on the UK side of things. They do differ a little bit depending on the country, depending on where you are globally. But this is the one for the US. But I bet you can guess where I'm going. I gave you a bit of a muddled up version on that first slide, but we're going to head back over to the Menti. I'm going to ask you two questions. What do you think is the most sustainable option in the waste hierarchy? Do you think it's energy recovery, recycling and composting, source reduction and reuse, or treatment and disposal? What is the most sustainable option? I'll give time for a few more of us to answer. No one thinks differently. We all think the same. We're all going for source reduction and reuse today.
I had half a mind to throw in a wrong answer just
Okay.
to see what would happen.
We've all gone for the same. I bet you can guess where the second question's going then. What do you think is the least sustainable option in the waste hierarchy? Energy recovery, recycling and composting, source reduction and reuse, or treatment and disposal. Okay, we've got a little bit different this time. We are going across the board slightly. Most of us saying treatment and disposal, people saying energy recovery. Okay, I'll give you the answers. I think most of us have answered now. Most of us got that one right, or we were maybe one off. But this is the order of the waste management hierarchy. So it is correct. All of you got that one. Source reduction and reuse being the most sustainable, then going through to recycling and composting, energy recovery, and also treatment and disposal. And if I just look at this in a little bit more detail on what the waste management hierarchy actually is, it is essentially the key to using less materials and avoiding waste in the first place. You may or may not have seen this reverse pyramid before, or maybe a version of it. Like I say, it's different depending on the country. But for those who haven't, the higher up this reverse pyramid you are, the closer we get to zero waste. And the higher up the waste hierarchy we are, the more circular our activities are. And then vice versa, the lower down the waste management hierarchy we are, the more linear we are, and the higher our whole life carbon is. And this waste hierarchy exists in different ways, as I mentioned, so different header names, but in general, the principles still follow through no matter where you are. If I look at this in a bit of detail, going through them all, source reduction and reuse, this is where we start reconsidering or considering what we are doing. So looking at preventing what we buy and also reusing items that we already have. Some packaging, for example, is designed for reuse. So an example over here in the UK is an organisation called the Pallet Loop. So they estimated that up to 90% of pallets were going out to sites and then not getting reused. So they create a business model where they take back the pallets that are going out to sites, refurbish them if they're broken, and then keep sending them back out. And this just keeps that circular economy going over and over and over again. Just so we're not throwing away these valuable items that we have. Recycling. So majority of the circular economy actually sits in recycling. If you prepare for reuse, for example, you maintain the quality of your materials. But recycling includes further processes. You will retain some value and you'll get a residual material, but you can't retain that initial value of a product. So an example might be breaking bricks and blocks into the likes of aggregates or shredding packaging for plastic pellets. Like I say, you do lose that integrity of the initial item and some of that value, but you do have another material that can then be used. Then we get into energy recovery. So examples of this are incineration or anaerobic indigestion. So you get some energy recovery from the likes of energy from waste schemes, for example, and you'll get that residual material or that residual energy that you can then use, but you cannot maintain the value of your item. Once it's lost, it is unfortunately lost. And then we hit treatment and disposal. So this is landfill, which ultimately we don't want to be at this stage. So when we think about the waste hierarchy, start considering maybe where you sit as an organization. Where does your waste go? Or maybe as a individual, and start thinking how I can like move myself up further up the waste management hierarchy. This is a good thing to take away from this session. Okay, you managed to get through the legislation side of things, so I'm going to touch on the financial case. It's all about asking ourselves why. And I think if the sustainability reasons, maybe the legislative reasons aren't enough for you, then hopefully the true cost of waste will put it into a little bit of perspective. So, an organisation in Scotland estimated the true cost of waste. On the left of this seesaw image, you can see the skip hire, which let's say costs $300 to hire a skip and have it brought and taken to and from site by a contractor. But the cost does not stop there. What actually happens is there are lots of other costs associated with the generation and handling of waste, and surveys from Zero Waste Scotland showed that this could add up to an additional total of 2,400, creating a true cost of waste. But I bet you can see where this one's going again. I'm going to ask you what you think them hidden costs are. What do you think is adding up to the true cost of waste? That additional £2,100 or dollars. We're heading back to the Menti to ask this one. What do you think are the other contributing factors to the true cost of waste? I'm also reading some of your comments there. When someone said when we say treatment and disposal, is that essentially landfill? Yeah, that's essentially landfill at the bottom there. See if I can answer some as we go. Oh, and Wendy answered at the same time. Okay, what are the other contributing factors to the true cost of waste? Transport, absolutely. Energy, labour, the fuel to transport, linking in with that one. Externalisation of harms, transport fees, pollution, raw material extraction, labour. Might repeat myself a couple of times as it moves. Some really good answers coming in here. Pollution is getting bigger, so a couple of us have put that one. Any more for any more? Disposal, transport. Have I missed any? Public health consequence, energy, pollution just got bigger again. Transport fees, land use. Yeah, some really good answers. With the time that we have, I will head back to the presentation. So essentially, this is what they estimated to be the true cost of waste and them hidden costs. As you can see, these are just headline parts of what was in there, but everything that you've just put on that word cloud absolutely contributes to that true cost of waste. So talking about the process of waste management itself and the need for storage, it could be used for something else. Damaged and wasted raw materials and design-driven waste, we might have loads of offcuts from something that didn't need to be there in the first place. Wasted energy and also labour. I know we mentioned all of these ones in the word cloud. And I'll give you these causes of construction waste that link into them headings. So they have these different causes of construction waste and what they can be. So I'm not going to touch on all of these, they are in the slide deck, but you can see them headings there. So client and design influence. So, having materials of unsuitable dimensions, which mean those on site have to constantly cut them. Maybe the designer or the client changes their mind after the products have already been ordered, for example, or having that resistance to adopt alternative materials. We've got delivery of products, over ordering. That's a big one that happens definitely on this side. But over ordering is a big one where we end up having wasted products, for example. Method of packaging, maybe it's inadequate and things get broken in the delivery process. And then site management and practices. So having poor management systems, poor stock control or organization links into that one, two down, three down. Poor storage, which leads to poor storage and handling, which things get broken or damaged, which means they can't be used anymore, so we just chuck them away. Or having excess materials again that get broken. And then that undue cutting that I mentioned in there, maybe we've got loads of offcuts which we don't need. And that just means we throw them away. But it's also worth talking about these kind of things because there's loads of them causes of waste, but it links into all those issues. You may be not non-compliant with the legislation in your county or your state, for example, but it also leads to bad reputation for your business. And if you have a bad reputation, it can affect your work winning, for example, if you're tendering for a new project. So always things to be more sustainable. It may link in with your strategy. It may link in with your client requirements. So it's all worth thinking about how we can be more resource efficient. Okay, we talked about plastics on that initial word cloud. I promise I'll run out of Menti questions eventually, but I'm going to ask you a few more before the end of the session. Oh, this one's not in here, so if we can put it in the chat, forgot to put it in the Menti. What do you think? What percentage of global plastics production do you think is packaging? Do you think it's 7%, 26%, or 44? We can just drop this one in the Zoom chat because I forgot to add it to the Menti. Got one answer coming in. I'll start reading them out once we've got a couple. What percentage of global's plastic production do you think is packaging? Someone's saying 44. I've got a 26. 44, 44, 44. Another 44, another 26. Okay, we're hovering between them two. And what percentage of plastics waste is packaging? Do you think it's 17, 44, or 63? What do we think? What percentage of global plastics waste is packaging? 63, 63, 63, 63, 63. We all think 63 on this one. Okay, we're all agreeing on this one. There's a couple of different answers on that first one. It's a really important thing to talk about is plastic packaging because plastic packaging made and used represents only 26 of the total volume of plastics used globally. However, plastic packaging waste represents 63%. So this is relatively old data and still holds pretty well. And it shows that we just don't value plastic packaging because it's only 26% of all plastics used, but 63% of all plastics wasted. So something we just don't value. And if we think back to the likes of the circular economy, how can we start considering how we design our waste? If we think back to the waste management hierarchy, how can we prevent it in the first place? But this brings me nicely to designing out waste. We've got this nice filler slide which says it's a systematic response that addresses a design problem, not a waste problem when we talk about the circular economy, because we can drive waste reduction and drive a circular economy by thinking about how we design our products from the very beginning. And I'm not going to go too in depth into the designing out waste because we do have another session on this, which goes into a little bit more detail. But as you can see on screen, principles for design approach. This is defined here as adopting a design approach that focuses on materials resource efficiency so that less material is used in the design and or less waste is produced in the construction process without compromising the design concept. We have a load of resources definitely on the UK side on lean design if you're interested in this, but we can definitely add resources to the US school if we haven't got them gaps filled, Wendy. We can definitely get lean design put on there if this is something you're interested in learning about. But essentially with this, we want our designs to work well. We want them to look good if that's the industry you're in, but we don't need to compromise sustainability and waste in the process. We can think about the right environments and how we can produce less waste in the process without compromising how our designs work. It's about thinking about new approaches such as design for manufacture and design for assembly or disassembly, lean design, and rethinking the problems that we have. So our customers, our clients will be just as happy at the end, but we don't need to compromise on sustainability. We can try and do better. We can try and design out our waste from the outset. And these are the core designing out waste principles. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because we can in another session, but these are them core principles. So designing for resource efficient procurement, thinking about who we're working with, who we choose to buy from, thinking about materials optimization, maybe changing our materials if we can. I alluded to offsite construction earlier on the manufacture phase. If we can do this, this is a great thing to put in place. Designing for reuse and recovery, and also designing for deconstruction and flexibility. These are all of our core principles that we can think about. And this graph shows the earlier you get involved, the more chance you have of achieving results. I will say wherever you can get involved, you can make a difference. Thinking about that earlier continuous link to the circular economy image I showed, no matter who you are, where you work in the supply chain, whether you're the subcontractor or the client, you can get involved, you can make a difference, make your voice heard so that you can make a difference. But if we can push to get in as early as possible, then we can make more of a difference. If you are the person who's boots on the ground, speak to your clients and say, here's the lessons learned. This is something you could improve on from next time so that that difference can be made early on next time. Okay, I'm going to fly through some examples so that we can try and get through some questions or comments at the end of the session. I'm going to fly through these as quick as I possibly can. So this is a presentation from an organization called Target. I think they're on the UK side. Don't know if they're international, but they provided us this presentation a couple of years back, and they manufacture vinyl floors and they talk about how they are implementing the circular economy into their business model. It's kind of similar to the ones earlier on when I talked about business models and how they're implementing it. But this slide here shows their 5 different principles basically on cradle to cradle, but you can see that they've got 5 principles: material health, product circularity, renewable energy and climate requirements, water stewardship, and also social fairness. And this is really important because remembering back to the UN Sustainable Development Goals that I talked about, all these different sustainability topics interlink with each other, and it's really important that we always have this in mind. But the most direct link here you can see is product circularity. So products are intentionally designed for their next use and are actively cycled in their intended use cycles. And they've also got different accreditations which allow them to prove their circularity. For example, Cradle to Cradle certified. So this is a globally recognized measure of safer, more sustainable products made for the circular economy. And to receive this certification, products are assessed for environmental and social performance across 5 different categories as well. So this is how they got that certification. And then also you can see if they've got this looking for circular products, but it has different key components of their products. So recyclable post-use. I always get this word wrong, but I think it's phthalate free. So it means that they've not got that in their products. And then they've also got their good for people and the planet. So again, that interlinkage as well. So investigating the health, safety, and environmental credentials of their products, something that is really important as well. And then finally, here on their presentation, they said this helps to hit sustainability targets and achieve green building certifications. And this is all in the slide deck for you to have a look at after the session as well. But I've got 2 more case studies of actual projects that we put together. So this first one is Green Valley Road Bridge in Ohio. And essentially this project replaced an old bridge using salvaged steel members from another local bridge rather than purchasing all new steel. So it means that they think back to that circular economy, they reuse them products rather than buying new ones. And this is linking in all the things I've talked about today. So the result led to $51,000 worth of savings compared to the use of all new materials. And the reuse of structural components led to both waste diversion and also that cost saving as well. So a hand in hand win on this project. And then one point that they made in the article that we found said that waste diversion is not just about material recycling, but about avoiding new material procurement and using existing structural elements. So I think this is a good example of a project that implemented all of that circular economy principles that we've talked about today. And then my final example for today is this EU infrastructure slash circular construction example. So this was, I think it's called Circuit project, which was an EU funded circular construction initiative using prefabricated concrete slabs for a new bridge incorporating 50% recycled concrete aggregate and waste bioash. So this project recognised that 1/3 of all EU waste is from construction and demolition. And for the bridge slabs in this project, 50% of the aggregates were replaced with recycled concrete. And this just moves beyond just diverting waste. It demonstrates using waste as a resource in a new infrastructure element. And it just shows how circular economy principles can be used in infrastructure, not just buildings and not just the business examples I showed earlier. I'm hoping the different examples that I've showed today show that the circular economy really can be embedded no matter where you are, no matter what industry you're working in, no matter what you manufacture, for example. Circular economy can hopefully be embedded everywhere we look, hopefully. I've got a question for you that I'm going to put on the Menti, but I'm going to open this up in the background as I finish off the slides for today. Ooh, if I put that one in the background, can you think of any good examples of circularity in your organization, in your work, in your everyday life? I'd really welcome your thoughts on this one as I finish off and summarize the session so that I can look at what you put in here and I'll also read any questions that you have. So just to summarize from me today is talking about one, the waste management hierarchy. Hopefully, if you take something away from today, it's thinking about how you can get further up this. I saw some comments just before in the chat about, source reduction and reuse being a little bit different. Absolutely. In the waste hierarchy used in the UK, this is separated out a little bit more. And I think there's different ones in the EU as well. It's just how they are on a global basis. They're all kind of same but different in a way. But when we push ourselves further up this waste management hierarchy, the closer we are to circular economy and circular economy business models, and the lower our whole life carbon. So connecting them topics together is a big one as well. And then just to recap on our circular economy, it's about thinking from the very beginning, at a design stage, at a new project stage. How are we going to look after this product? How are we going to look after this project? What are we going to do at the end of its life? Thinking about that end of life stage at the very beginning so that we can keep our product, our project in use for as long as possible and be able to cost save at the same time and comply with legislation, for example. Loads of different reasons why we should be implementing a circular economy, stepping away from this traditional mindset of take, make, and dispose of our items. Okay, that is all from me in terms of the content for today. I'm going to put the Menti on and see what you've got there. And I'm also going to read some of your comments that are coming into the chat as well. Someone's put it sounds like the circular economy is almost a counter slash remedy for the planned obsolescence business model. This was very helpful. Thank you. I really glad you got some use out of this one. And absolutely it is. If we step away from just throwing away, think about your phone, for example. If you break it, if you drop it down the toilet or you drop it on the floor and it breaks, in a traditional linear economy, we would just throw it away or put it in a drawer. In a circular economy business model, you take it back to the manufacturer and say, how can I fix my phone? Or how can I keep this in use? Or how can I sell it back to you and buy a new version, for example? It's different ways of thinking about a circular economy, but it does apply to a whole life. How would you all suggest holding product corporate programs to account for theoretical recyclability of newly produced materials? Are there metrics or key questions consumers, purchasers, specifiers should ask? Is this when you're procuring from a new supplier, for example? I saw Wendy unmuted yourself there.
Yeah, I was actually going to go back to the planned obsolescence point, but yes,
Mm.
I think this is a really interesting question from Joey about oh, more comments coming through. Um, yeah, is this from a design perspective or
Yeah, if we have more context on that one, maybe we can answer that one a bit
yeah?
better.
Because my mind went to cradle to cradle regulations or
Yeah.
accreditations. Like there are accreditation bodies that you can ask for to say like, well, how
Hmm.
much recycled content does your product have, and do you have the data to back it up?
And if it's suppliers, putting it into tender processes as well, if you're procuring from them, that's a way you could address that, putting requirements on your suppliers at the same time and asking them, what are you doing? And amending them to include these good bits in there. Someone's also put it might be helpful to change the notion of end of life to end of present use.
That's a
That's
good
a
one.
really good point as
Yeah.
well. It's a good way to shift mindset as well.
Yeah.
Let me scroll back up. I might have missed a few. Target's a
Yeah.
French company, big and presence all over the world. That's a good point.
That is, yeah. That is I think I might add a couple resources to the follow-up email to help you guys with some accredited bodies that you can refer back to. You know, if you see the little recycling symbol on a product or a website or something, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. You know, greenwashing is obviously a thing. So yeah, happy to include some resources where it's a little bit like, okay, you can
Hmm.
trust this organization, they hold suppliers or manufacturers to accountability. So yeah, happy
Hmm.
to include some of that information.
It's a good idea. And if there's any other resources you think would be useful in the library, always let us know and we can try and plug them gaps as well. Someone said a good example for plastics packaging designed for sustainability would be Sprite, changing from a green bottle to a clear bottle. That's similar to in the UK. They changed the lids on milk bottles. They changed them from coloured to clear ones. And we had an example in the UK of a waste provider on kind of what the difference actually meant. And I don't think a lot of people know that. And it just means it's easier for it to be broken down, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if this is an American thing as well, but here in Canada, the bread bags, you get that little plastic tab to keep the
Mm,
bag closed. Now it's all cardboard. So that's been an
that's a
interesting
good one.
development. I wanted to really quickly because this example kept popping into my head, and if any other questions we haven't answered come through, feel free to interrupt me. But just thinking outside the box, we had an example from Skanska a few months ago on a different event where they were building a new academic building at a university in Atlanta, and something that's quite a booming industry in Atlanta right now is the film industry, and the film industry goes through a ton of timber building sets, taking them down, and a lot of that stuff just goes to waste. So what they did was they built an installation in the foyer of this building using 100% recycled wood from a film set, from a soundstage. And I just thought that that was a really interesting idea. If you don't think about these things, or you don't make those connections, then it's a missed opportunity. So
Really good example. I've seen a few questions I've scrolled up about legislation in the UK. The legislation in the UK is ever evolving and quite complex. We've got quite a lot happening over here. So we've got the likes of simpler recycling, we've got landfill tax, we've got EPR coming in, we've got loads of different things. So I think Wendy replied to that one, but we can send you some stuff on UK laws because there's quite a lot of different things happening across the UK in terms of this kind of thing. See if I've missed anything.
yeah, Habitat for Humanity, great example. Love that organization.
You've got some really good examples coming in here as well. Something else we'll add to the follow-up email as well, so you can see all the responses that came through. Because we've got the likes of bamboo toothbrush, baby clothes supplies, and I really like whoever put this is very UK, but a car boot sale. I don't know if you've ever been to one, but that is very UK.
It was the Canetta building. Yes, thanks, Joey. Yeah. Love a car boot sale. Well, great. Thank you to everyone for being at today's session. Lucy, did we have anything else that we wanted to wrap up with?
No, nothing on this, unless you want to get in touch after the session. I will drop for the final few minutes. My contact details are on the screen if you do want to get in touch, or Wendy is always available. Sorry, making yourself available there, Wendy. But Wendy's also available to answer any questions. If you've got anything you want to follow up, whether it's waste or carbon, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have if you want to talk more sustainability, because the things that you've talked about in the chat today are really useful and nice to see as well.
All right.
That's from
Well,
me.
thanks, everyone. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for being at the session. Thank you to Lucy for your presentation. It's always really a fascinating subject to talk about. So great discussion from you all. Great comments, great questions. Please do keep an eye out for my email with the supplementary resources, the recording, the slides, all of that stuff. And again, yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And we hope to see you at the next session. So thanks, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much.